Hi, my name's Chris Caesar. I'm a landscape photographer based out of my studios here in Scrooby near Bawtry. Welcome to episode 2 of series 3 of the 4 seasons in print series of videos. A series in which I look at some of the photographs I've made over the years in the different seasons, and then I chat about the photograph, maybe looking at some of the inspirations behind it or how it was captured. And then I chat about the paper that I've used for each particular print, trying to explain why I've used that particular type of paper. So hopefully you'll see as the episodes go on that paper can play a big part in how you can let your work be seen and perceived by others. Okay, so there is a difference between a matte paper, shiny paper, textured, and so on. So this is episode 2 summer, so we'll get straight into it. The first picture in this episode is this one. This is called the Drinking Dinosaur, Flamborough. Flamborough is a beautiful part of the Yorkshire coast. It's full of coves and caves and formations, sea stacks, lots of cliff top walks with lots of things like this that reach out into the sea. This is the star of the show for me at Flamborough. This is called High Stacks, or as it's affectionately known, the Drinking Dinosaur, because it looks like a dinosaur that's having a drink in the sea. And this is a shot made at dawn one morning. I was with a friend and I decided to do a long exposure the long exposure will render certain things flat. So obviously you get a hint of movement in the sky, but where you've got waves or ripples, if you shoot for 30 seconds, what you end up with is like an average. The camera will portray an average of what was there. So something that's a sine wave will render flat. So that's why the water looks flat. And because the water looks flat, anything that's not moving, i.e. the dinosaur, this will render really sharp and it will almost take on a 3D look. Also, you get this nice smoothness that goes on with long exposures. So I like to do a long exposure where there's like a busy sky involved or water. Because I do like to have that help in separating certain bits of the picture from other bits that would otherwise be a little bit noisy, you know, with the water and the ripples and stuff like that. One of the things that I had to be careful of was the positioning of the sun. So I wanted the sun to be in play to cast a little bit of light onto some of the landscape, but I didn't want it to be fully up because then it's too difficult to control. So I started shooting when it was just visible, and 30 seconds later, this is where it was. So nice shot, a little bit of colour up here, just diagonally opposite the dinosaur. So there's some nice balance to the picture. Got a nice introduction here with a little bit of grasses and some shaly beach, and then one of the headlands here just under Flamborough Lighthouse. So all in all, we've got this nice picture that's a mixture of clarity and some sort of areas that have been rendered neutral, let's say, sort of clean. So it's got a clean feel, this image. And for that reason, I wanted to reproduce it on a paper that had a clean finish. So we've already looked at papers like Arch 88 in the previous episode, which is a beautiful smooth matte paper, and this would look fantastic on that. But I wanted to show you what it looks like on a gloss paper as well. And it's also a chance for me to introduce this paper to you. So if I wiggle this one, you'll see on the other ones we've had matte. This is a traditional sort of gloss media. But this is a paper called Baryta Photographique II. And Baryta Photographique II, it's a very popular paper. Unlike Platine Fibe Rag and Baryta Prestige, this doesn't have a speckly surface. It's quite smooth. It's quite glass-like. There is a slight texture. There's a slight sort of orange peel texture to it, but its overall effect is smooth. So if you're looking for a smooth gloss, if you want to produce a picture like the old papers that were like wet, I don't know, things like Fuji Crystal Archive maybe, if I'm remembering that right, it had a really sort of wet look. Well, this isn't as wet as that, but it's getting on for those kind of lines of smoothness. So this is the smoothest gloss paper that Canson Infinity make for me. And there's an old adage that the smoother the media, the more detail you're going to see. So if you're working with macro and things like that, the smooth papers might give you a little bit more detail over, say, a heavily textured paper. My personal experience is all the papers from Canson Infinity, whether they're smooth or textured, they all have exceptional detail. I've never really looked at a print and thought, oh, that's lovely, but I wish I'd used a different paper, because I think the detail's suffering. So I'm not sure about the smoothness equals detail thing. However, it would seem to make sense. So this is a smooth paper anyway, and it's got a smooth gloss finish. So it maintains these elements of clarity that you find within this picture, and it lets the 3D nature of the subject jump out. So I hope that makes sense. So for this picture, I've chosen the Baryta Photographique II gloss. Okay, so here's the second picture in the summer episode. This is a picture called Pastel Dawn Filey. Now I'm often at Filey. We have a little place at Filey, and we love to go there just to chill out and recharge batteries. And sometimes I'll pop down onto the beach. And this wasn't winter, so this was about 4 a.m. But it was lovely. I went down to shoot Filey town from the beach. But while I was waiting for the sun to come up, because I needed the sun up to sort of cast some warm light on the buildings, and this is just before dawn, so I was waiting, and while I was waiting, I found this little pole that sticks out of the sea, and noticed that there was some really beautiful pastel colours going on, and it was just a case of shooting it, really. So it was, before sunup, so we're probably looking at a few seconds exposure. And this is the result, and it's just pre-dawn glow here that's reflecting in the water. Some lovely colours, pastels, and it's just a really nice study of colour that we find before dawn at the seaside. So it's quite nice. It's quite unusual for me to come across things like this and shoot images on these kind of days. For this picture, I wanted to... It's got a very artistic feel for me. It's very painterly. So I wanted to use a matte paper, and I wanted to go as painterly as I could. So one of the papers that Canon Infinity make is called Arche Aquarelle. Aquarelle, French word for watercolour. So this is a very, very, very heavily scallop textured paper, and it's very watercolour-like. If you find a traditional watercolour paper with this heavily textured marks and everything, that's what this has got. So it gives a very sort of realistic impression of a painting. So I've decided to print it on that. One of the things I do like about these papers that are heavily textured is because the paper sort of has these sort of valleys and rises on the surface. I quite like the way that the light hits those valleys and, on the edges from the sides. So it does something, depending on the image that you're using, maybe not so much on this one, but if you do print on a heavily textured paper, the light, the ambient light that's lighting that print will have an effect on how you see the picture, because the surface isn't smooth. It's got these little ridges, the grooves and the hollows and the depths that lie within the paper. So again, this can change the way that somebody, the viewer, interacts with your picture. So Arche Aquarelle, it's interesting that it's called Aquarelle watercolour, because I think of it as a very painterly finish. So I would use it for anything that looks like it might make a good watercolour. So with me, it could be misty scenes on a Scottish loch at dawn, on a moody day. It could be black and white, long exposures on a windy day in the middle of a loch or a lake. It could be this kind of thing. So anything that looks painterly would be well worth trying on Arche Aquarelle. It's a matte paper, so no reflections. Great depth of field. This is another one of the pure whites with no optical brightness. Another one of the cylinder mold made papers. The Canon Pro-300. This I would have thought was the biggest test for any inkjet printer, this paper. It's quite chunky, and with its matte surface it can be difficult for lower end printers to handle. But the Canon Pro-300 never has a problem with it. So the fact that it takes this paper means that you shouldn't be having any problem with any fine art paper, I wouldn't think. Certainly the Canon Infinity range. So that's what I've used for this one, Pastel Dawn at Filey, and that is the second image in the summer episode. Okay, image 3. This is a picture called Wind and Rain, Glencoe. I remember this. This is when I was scouting the area. So when I run workshops, so say for example Budapest, which is just about to come on the website, I go 2 or 3 times on my own, which is a hard life. But this was hard because it was really windy and it was really raining. And I remember parking up this little car park bit where you can pull in just by this view. I clambered out of the car and I had a golf brolly. So I went down, got the golf brolly out, and it was battering me. But luckily the golf brolly was shielding the camera a little bit from the wind. It was really, really windy. So I took a few shots just to make sure I got one with no camera shake, no movement. And I ended up with this, so obviously in real life it's greens and browns and pretty insipid grey sky. So I thought it'd make a nice monochrome conversion. So I made it into a nice monochrome conversion. As far as printing goes, I've printed this on a couple of different medias in the past. There are some images that I know what I want to print on. And there are some images that maybe, would look good on a few things. And it depends what mood I'm in when I'm printing it, on how I want that particular print to look and how I want people to think of it. So for this one, I've decided for this episode to print this on one of the new papers again from the St Cuthbert's Mill, the Somerset Mill, as I call it. And this is the Somerset Watercolour 240. We saw a picture earlier in the spring episode where we used a colour picture on this paper. And now I'm wanting to show you how it handles black and white. So this is a 240 gram natural white cotton rag paper with a slight texture. It's very white, but there are no optical brighteners, so very, very archival. It's made on a cylinder mould, so although it's 240 gram, the fact that the fibres in this paper are twice as long and multi-dimensional compared to the Fourdrinier machines that have the fibres half as long and they all go in the same direction. This is very, very, very stable. It has a high level of integrity. So the 240 grams shouldn't be a worry. So it's mould made, which is as close to the old handmade papers as you're going to get. And it's made here and cylinder mould down at St Cuthbert's Mill, which is part of the Canson Infinity family. But it's the way it handles blacks that impresses me. I did a day at Canon's offices with some photographers, and we were showing them print and explaining about papers and printers and how they all work. And I took some pre-prints down that I'd made on this and some monochromes, and I was pleasantly surprised by the depth of the black that this paper can handle. Now obviously this is a matte paper and we're using the new matte black cartridge on the Canon Pro-300, which is phenomenal. But the thing that all the photographers at that particular session said was they were surprised that the matte paper is showing blacks on a par with what the shiny papers can do. So this is testament to where we've got to with paper technology, engineering, and the inks that are being produced by people like Canon for the Canon Pro-300. So this is the black and white version, and as you can see, the composition itself, it's got this lovely sort of S-shaped curve going throughout, and it seems to be splitting the picture into 2 halves. We've got this half down here where we've got some rugged landscape and a little subject here, which is a little cottage. And then we've got this half here, which is all about the elements, the wind. We can see the rain falling. I quite like this sort of natural vignette that's going on up in that top corner. I think if that wasn't there, it would be a different picture to look at. If all this was light grey, it would be difficult. But this is kind of pushing you back into the middle. So it's really working well with the conditions. There's obviously, the sun's obviously over there somewhere. There's a bright area there, but you can see it's just falling over the top of the Buccolative Moor there. But it's a nice picture. I like the split. It's not a diagonal line, but I think the thing that saves it, this can kind of take you out of a picture, this kind of effect, or a diagonal line, but we've got this area of black that's kind of bringing the viewer back in. So as a composition, I think it works really well. And I think it works really well on this Somerset Watercolour 240 from the guys down at St Cuthbert's Mill. And that's image number 3. Here is image number 4 in this summer episode. This is a place that I like to go every 2 or 3 years. This is up in the Yorkshire Dales, in a village that I'm calling Muker, M-U-K-E-R. It's next to Keld. I think the locals might call it Mucker, but I always think it's called Muker, so that's what I call it. And Muker is known for the valley floors being full of wildflowers and colour in the summer months. And I like to go when the buttercups are out. So for this to happen, this carpet of yellow, the summer buttercups, the sheep have to be removed or there'll be no buttercups. If you leave the sheep there, you'll just have a green field. So they take the sheep out, and 2 to 3 weeks later, this is the result. And then these flowers are harvested because they're used for fodder for the animals, in the winter months. But during the time in between the sheep going and this being cut down, you get a good week, 2 weeks of colour. And this is all across the dales, all across Wensleydale. In the fields you'll see buttercups, and Swaledale you'll see buttercups. And it's just a really nice thing to see. So every couple of years I go back and have another go at this kind of thing. So this day I'm walking into one particular part of the meadows, and I noticed this curved wall and the trees. The flowers look beautiful as always, but it was this sky that was really catching my attention. It was really giving that impression of a fresh summer breezy day. We've got these strong wind clouds here, but there's some nice colours. It's nice and contrasty, and it would be a good sort of image to print on the paper that handles the contrast well, which is the Baryta Prestige II. However, because we've got some blue here, which is a mid-tone, and we've got the yellow and the stone, which is mid-tone, I've decided to go with one of my fallback papers, which is the Platine Fibe Rag. This is the one that's nice and easily handled. It's beautiful to sort of feel and handle, especially on roll, as I've said before. But it's superb. It prints in you will get results that look very traditional, very highly detailed. I showed you in the spring episode a standard picture on it, the Venice one and the black and white one. Well, this is more of a landscape colour one, but it's handling this tonal range with ease. So although I think it's good, like a good all-rounder, it doesn't mean to say that it can't handle contrast and it can't handle blacks, if you remember the steam engine shot from the spring episode. So this is full of contrast, it's full of drama, and the paper's done a really, really good job of representing the level of contrast within the picture, the tonal range. So that's image number 4 in the summer episode, which is called Summertime, Muker Meadows. So that brings us to our final image of the summer episode. This is a picture called Swirling Cloud, Blee Tarn. And this was made, this is a bit of a one-off because it was made on a workshop which I call the Lakes, the slower one. This is a workshop that I run in September in the Lake District because I've finally come to realise that not everyone wants to get up at 4 a.m, 5 a.m, 6 a.m. And sometimes people want to go away with their cameras and have a nice relaxing holiday and make some lovely pictures. So the September workshop, if ever you check it out, you'll find that we start at breakfast, we meet, we have a lovely breakfast, we go out all day shooting, stop for coffee now and again, and then we finish at tea time. So when we might normally be stood out waiting for a sunset, stood cold in a field or whatever, we're having dinner and chatting about the day we've had and the day that's coming. So if you're up for some fair weather photography where we shoot things like this, then do check out the slower one, the Lake District workshop, which will always be running late August, early to mid-September. So anyway, this was made then. Some lovely people on this, the inaugural workshop. And we went up to Blee Tarn one day, and what a treat it was. It didn't stay like this for long, I'll be honest, because you can see we've got these patches here of rolling mist and stuff. And you can see here the overcast cast clouds. This is obviously when the sun's broken through and we've got patches, and it's lovely. But within half an hour of this, 20 minutes of this, it was overcast and it never came back. But we were there in time, luckily. We made a few shots around the little tarn, using some of the rocks as foreground detail, and then we came to just try and concentrate on this, the Langdale Pikes here, which you can't see the top because of the cloud, and this lovely contrast and reflection that's going on. And I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised by the conditions on the day. And it's lovely in colour. There's some lovely bits of blue sky there and some lovely greens down here, but it's a cracking monochrome conversion. And it's full of contrast. So simple composition, you know, make sure we've got these reflections coming in here. I don't like, where I can, I won't do a 50-50 on things like this. I think it looks more natural if it's offset a little. However, this was critical to make sure this is in. I didn't want to lose any of that because, you know, we don't see these kind of reflections every day. So I wanted to make sure I did it justice. So I'm happy with this split. I'm also happy with this area here, just finishing the picture off at the top, almost like a little border. But this picture is all about passion and drama. It's all about contrast and power and excitement. And for that, I wanted to really portray that on the finished printed image. The paper that will always do that for me and for you from the Canson Infinity range is Baryta Prestige II. This is the one with the really, really, really high Dmax, possibly the highest Dmax of any paper in the world, which means this will get blacks down better than anything, which means this can handle contrast potentially better than anything. So it's a little bit like the Platine Fibe Rag that I like so much, but on steroids. It's just got a little bit more depth, a little bit more tonal range. So when we do something that's got high contrast, it almost gives it kind of a 3D look. It's beautiful, striking, dominant and bold. So anything, if you're shooting strong black and whites or portraits maybe for monochrome, you could do a lot worse than check out Baryta Prestige II. I think you'll absolutely love it. So there you go. That's the final picture from this episode, which is summer. So the next episode will be autumn. So until then, thank you for watching, and keep your eyes checked. It'll be about a week before the autumn one comes online. Thank you.